Welcome back, everybody, to the Learning Can't Wait podcast. I'm thrilled to introduce you to our next guest. We have Nick Gross, the CEO and co-founder of Find Your Grind. Nick, welcome.
Thanks so much for having me. So pumped to be here. Yeah, this is really great, Haley. Really appreciate it.
I'm happy you're here. I do need to tell something to our audience because a lot of my former students listen to this podcast. In fact, one of them was just messaging me the other day. They were listening to an episode. Nick Gross is not, in fact, my blood brother, but despite the fact that I used to have the last name Gross, but we are now connected in the larger sense in the scope of the world. My students used to call me Miss G when I was unmarried.
Nice.
Yeah.
Nice. It's got a good ring to it, so I understand
Yeah.
that.
So if they're listening, I just needed to get that out of the way because they would be wondering if you were in fact the brother that I had never introduced them to.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. You never know. Very, very possible.
Well, Nick, I'm so excited for you to be here. I know a lot about what you've been building, but I want you to share with everybody how you got here because you have quite an interesting story. Can you share with our audience, how did you come to be the personal and professional version of yourself?
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks again for having me. It's been a very interesting and unconventional journey to how Find Your Grind has become what it has. I always say that I never planned to be in education. Education, especially ed tech, kind of found me through a batch of circumstances and really kind of organic situations that, opened this opportunity up for me over the years. And really, my background starts in music. I found kind of my talent early on through the drums when I was a young kid. Was really thankful to be able to tap into what I felt like I was the most gifted at as a young person, which I think really drives a lot of what we do at Find Your Grind and why we do it. I signed my first record deal when I was 17 years old as a senior in high school. That was kind of my vision and as a young person was I wanted to be a rock star, right? That was my goal in life. It sounds ridiculous, but
Well, sometimes it happens though.
yeah, sometimes it happens. I was rocking the full mohawk for 4 years in high school. So a lot of it for me, I always kind of came down to manifestation and like really putting myself mentally and emotionally into situations that I wanted to become and wanted to be without really even knowing it as a young person. And I guess we can, I don't know, talk a bit more about that later. But opened up my first recording studio after I had my first record deal, and I was driving downtown and live in Los Angeles with my wife at the time. And we saw a big wall that had graffiti on it that said "Find Your Grind," and we were like, "That's really cool. That saying is awesome. I don't know what it is or what we want to do with it, but let's figure out if there is something in our life to use that for." And so we started to look around at what we had access to, which was this recording studio I had launched in LA when I was 20. And we were like, why don't we start to give back to the local community through giving young people exposure and access into the world of the music industry that want to be musicians or, producers or writers or whatever it may be, and kind of give them that firsthand experience of what it's like to be in a recording studio. And we called it Find Your Grind. So that was really the initial, like, kind of first quarterly things that we would do is we create these Find Your Grind experiences where we partner with other groups around LA and bring kids through our studio space. And the idea from there was like, how do we start to do what we're doing in music across hundreds of emerging careers and industries, right? Like how fast the world is changing, and there's so many cool different alternative lanes and non-traditional lanes that young people are finding today to earn a living and live really meaningful lives around. And we wanted to highlight that. So we went out, took a production crew, filmed a ton of these videos, and actually went on the road and got to speak in schools for a year and a half on the Find Your Grind tour, which was amazing, getting just to be in front of hundreds of thousands of kids every day. It sounds incredibly chaotic, which it was, but it was really enlightening for us to be firsthand experiencing what schools are like and what educators and students talk about and what they feel about things. And I think that experience for us was amazing to be able to take all those videos and content we had created around these emerging careers and just help kids get inspired through this tour of like what's possible, right? Like how do we help kids find their grind and position a future for them that is meaningful. And 9 times out of 10, most kids will say their biggest anxieties and pressures And fears stem from not knowing what their next steps are going to look like. And like, how do they apply what they're learning in school to what the real world is actually like? And so that became a big problem for us to solve. And, launched Find Your Grind as a scalable technology that could help solve that problem shortly after that tour. But that's kind of the origination of how I fell into education, is it stemmed through music and really grew pretty organically into what we're trying to do today.
What you're right. So non-traditional. I'm curious. On that first kind of launch of Find Your Grind, how many kids agreed with you and wanted to be a rock star when they grew up?
We don't have enough rock star careers on Find Your Grind. We have a lot of, we do a lot of music-based stuff, but I would have to dig into the data and
Yeah.
see how many kids that use it.
Nick, I'll be honest with you. One of the first questions I ask founders and ed tech leaders when I meet them is, how many educators do you have leading your organization? And the reason I ask that question is because, and I realize it's a little bit bold and sometimes it makes people frustrated if they don't. The reason I ask that question is because I think so often good ideas that don't have context in the school environment miss the mark. But when
Mhm.
I learned about Find Your Grind, and the road tour that you did, visiting hundreds of schools across the US, meeting hundreds of thousands of kids and teachers and school leaders, I was like, okay, so let me ask a follow up now. If you're not an education leader, how many schools did you visit before really building out your product? And you really inspired that question because, yeah, sure, you're not an educator. You acknowledge that, but you've done the work to learn about what schools are experiencing and how kids are living. So, kudos to you for that.
Thank you. Yeah, on our current team of 25 people, I would say over half have come from being previous
Look
educators
at that.
or teachers in the space that kind of know it. The first
Yeah.
hire that I made was our director of curriculum, who's still at the company 5 years later, that built out the first version of a curriculum for Find Your Grind. Obviously, I do not come from that background, so the first thing for me was like, we have tons of these awesome career videos that are incredibly engaging, highly produced, stuff that you would not normally see in education. That was the start off point for us. Like, how do we make stuff that kids want to watch and think is,
Yes.
and then how do we wrap a real curriculum around that and give students an experience beyond just what they're watching and start to incorporate the learning elements of it. So that was our first original hire, someone who came from education. And then since
Yeah.
then, we've been lucky enough to kind of have, which I think is an advantage too, to have half a team of course in education that knows the ins and outs and the standards and the box
Yes.
side of things that I know nothing about. And now I know a lot more about, having been in it for 5 years. But the other side of the team that comes from just purely creative, different industry backgrounds, I think is what makes the brand of Find Your Grind unique. Like, we really wanted to make a special, engaging brand first and foremost that young people would think is cool, for lack of better words. And like, I think Find Your Grind does a good job of standing out in an education space that feels sometimes pretty boring and stagnant, and there's so much of it out there. And so how do you kind of position yourself differently? So we take both that approach, right? Like the learning educator side of making sure that the validity of the product and the content is there from what schools are expecting, but then also from a creative brand side, how do we get kids excited about wanting to use something?
Okay, that's so awesome. And so now I just got my answer. You're both and. Not only do you have the educators on your team, but you also did this roadshow. Can you talk to me a little bit about what your learnings were? You named that you were enlightened when you visited these schools. What did you take away from that? And if you could like speak to the members of the audience who are listening that maybe are ed tech leaders who haven't spent a ton of time with their prospective customers or the people that are buying their tools.
Yeah, yeah. I guess I don't want to sound pessimistic on the industry, but I feel like going back into schools 15 years after I had graduated from my school experience and kind of seeing how little has changed,
Mm-hmm.
how slow the cog wheel of education sometimes tends to evolve, was pretty disheartening, but also um, gave me an awesome awareness of where innovation could step in to be a factor. I think initially for us, we set out building a product that of course, we listen to customers, and we do tons of user testing before we build product ideas with the actual end users and all of that. But wanting to make sure that, it took us a minute to evolve into what schools are used to in terms of those, I guess, standardization box checker things that need to happen in schools. Because for us, I think we hit it so hard initially with the innovation side and wanting to make something engaging and cool and different. And I think faced some headwinds with that, to where we started to have to kind of marriage the two together, around year 3, year 4, as we started to learn more. But that's what made me excited. Like, I didn't want to do something in education that was the same. Like, I think it needs the innovation. It needs to be pushed. It needs to bring in different, creative ideas of like how we're meeting students where they're at today. And that's what the idea was initially for us with Find Your Grind and how we wanted to do it. And like I said before, the other piece of it, for me, was like really having conversations with kids around those anxieties and pressures and fears. And like, we know that there's a massive mental health epidemic and problem with young people today, which we could go on to tangents around that. But I think the other biggest side of it is really the anxiety and pressure of having to figure out what happens next after school, and wanting to have that feeling of fulfillment and meaning in the work that they do versus just, the paycheck and the money side of things. And how do we help students start to think through what those meaningful parts in their life look like, and then start to match that to career opportunities. And that was a big fundamental driver for us with Find Your Grind of how we approached it. And so that fear around like, how do I know what my next steps are going to look like? How do I get prepared for the real world? How do I develop skills that are going to matter today? And what does that look like? I think was a big missing piece for us in schools that we didn't see when we did this tour. And unfortunately, I think lacks time and space and dedication within a school day of like, why aren't we helping kids more with, giving them at least an hour a day to focus on this future readiness conversation and what that looks like, and being more intentional around that in schools. It's a big wish. Obviously, it's a lot different when you actually, put head to the pavement and look at what's going on in schools. But that's our goal, right? We want to make sure that there's intentionality around this process and product.
What really strikes me about the method you're going about is this is not the conversation of just what do you want to be when you grow up. And I think the reason why that's important is because you named that there's a mental health crisis. We know that disengagement in school and life is at an all-time high for kids. You can read any Atlantic article, New York Times article about how disengaged kids are right now. And my kids are little, my own children are little, and it's something I think a lot about. But what you're doing that's different is you're helping kids identify the life they want to live and then matching that to potential pathways. Can you talk a little bit about what the curriculum is and how it achieves that particular goal, and maybe some of the implementations? I know like the lifestyle fair that you ran at Montgomery County ESE. Like, can you talk a little bit about that? Because I do think that's a differentiator for some of this future ready talk that I see happening today.
Yeah, totally. And great question. I guess a little bit to unpack there. I guess that our fundamental easiest way to explain what Find Your Grind is we really blend self-discovery, career readiness, and 21st century skills into a comprehensive curriculum experience for a student, that is highly engaging, highly bite-sized in terms of the activities that they go through, taking no longer than 2 minutes at a time, short to the point, with an end goal of a student being able to have a student plan of what their future goals look like, their career interests, their next steps after school, and aligning that to post-secondary, et cetera. So we really also wanted to make sure that we emphasized, like, a lot of companies throw out this word future ready. And so we really, out of the gate, made sure that we wrote a framework around what we see future readiness meaning, and then how do we measure that within the product of how a student becomes more future ready over time as they engage and Find Your Grind. And so we back that into 4 dimensions, and I won't get too specific and nerdy here, but I will say this because it's important. We measure students based off of 4 things. So it's their self-awareness, their social awareness, their career awareness, and their action awareness of how well they feel oriented to be able to take action on their next steps. And so anything that a student does, whether it's an activity completion, an assessment that they take, a formative assessment, a summative assessment at the end of a unit, a career video that they watch around something that interests them. We are mapping those to those 4 key competencies and then delivering a future ready score along their journey throughout the process. So that's how we've been able to kind of back this concept of future readiness, where we almost like guarantee that a student becomes more future ready by going through our product. We don't just say it. And then maybe back up a bit, the whole idea around Find Your Grind started with lifestyle first, to your point. Like, how do we meet kids where they're at? They care about what their lives are going to look like around their work, right? More so than ever. And so we kick off every journey with a lifestyle assessment. It's a 2 to 3 minute assessment that asks questions around, their values, how they imagine themselves working, their work environments, what type of home environments do they imagine themselves living in? Do they want to travel for work? Do they want to stay home for work? When they go to pack their suitcase, what is the first thing that they go for to pack in that suitcase? So things like that. And then we match a student with their top 3 lifestyles, which we have 16. And then from there, we start to showcase and introduce personalized careers that match those lifestyles. So that's really kind of the flipped framework of like, yeah, it's not what you want to be, it's who do you want to be. And so now if I'm a 13-year-old kid that knows that, hey, instead of a specific career that I could go for, I know that I'm an explorer, a maker, and a humanitarian. And wow, I can use those lifestyles throughout a lifetime to shift into multiple careers. If it's not, we see kids every 2 to 3 years now changing jobs. But knowing that I have those attributes and those lifestyle characteristics is just a different framework to kind of ease the conversation and relieve that pressure, I think, of having to go take a career assessment, get your top 5 careers, and then go have to spend, the next 4 years of your life potentially wasting a ton of time, energy, money on those things, not really knowing why you're doing it. So that's our reversed kind of methodology there. And then the fundamental curriculum is really where we help build these real life skills, call them what you want, soft skills, employability skills, 21st century skills, really embedded into the core of what our curriculum units are. So that's that kind of blend of self-discovery, career readiness, and 21st century skills that we offer and Find Your Grind, and kind of how we get there.
When I think about a kid, and when I think about a kid being told like, oh, I'm an explorer, or, I took this assessment, like I'm an explorer. I have this quality about me that maybe they didn't have a word for, but they like understood a sense. It helps define so much of who they are in the future. When I was in the classroom and I was a teacher, I used to tell kids like, you are who you decide you want to be, and like you can be so many qualities that you might not currently identify as your own. Like I used to tell kids, you said, oh, we should get, I don't want to get too nerdy here. I used to tell kids, if you don't leave my classroom thinking you're a nerd, I failed my job. Like I want you to think you are a nerd, like you like to learn, curiosity is
Yeah.
cool, like all of those things.
Big
So I,
time.
I really love the naming it, and also how flexible the naming it can be for future paths. Nick,
Absolutely.
one thing I know you're really excited about is the next iteration, which is the integration of social emotional learning into this process. What are you building now, as it relates to social emotional learning, and how does it connect to the work that you just described in your curriculum as it is?
Yeah, we're really excited to kind of take a next step now that we've been in market 4 years, going into our 5th year this fall. We're building out a product called Future Balance, which is the whole intention of that is to measure a student's well-being and emotional progress and emotional growth. Think kind of these quick check-ins that pop up every single day for you. Hey, Haley, how are you feeling today? From 1 to 5. Emoji sad face is number 1, happy face is number 5. Hit on an emoji that records a little moment of how they're feeling that day, and to be able to kind of measure that over time, to be able to kind of track how a student is emotionally evolving alongside their learning journey. To be able to attract both of those things, I think is a differentiator for us in the space, to not only offer the curriculum and micro-credentialing tools that we do on the learning side for students, but then also to start tapping into this mental health and wellness bucket side of things, which we have a lot of learning to do and take it very seriously. And that's why I try and stay as high level with it as I can right now until we learn more. we're kind of in alpha phase right now with it, but really excited just to be able to like have an opportunity if there is a serious situation where a counselor or a teacher can intervene with a student because of future balance and help save a really bad situation from happening, amazing. But more so being able to show that emotional wellness over time of a student as they progress through Find Your Grind, I think will be really interesting to see that evolution of a student, and being able to have that kind of data on students will be great.
One of the pieces I've talked about before in this podcast with social emotional experts is that social emotional learning isn't like a chapter in the curriculum you teach. It should be part of everything you do. And, again, just like throwing more compliments in your direction, what I think is cool about the alpha phase and the 30,000-foot level you just provided on this perspective is that not only do teachers have that vantage point, but it's just another touch point for kids to get in touch with themselves and recognize, like, well, where am I feeling? Like you have to explicitly teach a child what it feels like when you're angry. Like, not all kids recognize anger and the symptoms of anger, the rapid heartbeat, the, heat in your face, the, you know, clenching of your fist. Like, not every kid has that emotional intelligence for no other reason than it's not necessarily natural for everyone to explain that. And so, what I think is really cool is it provides another opportunity for schools to be a place where kids learn not just academic skill, but also social emotional to really further their own future and ability to be successful in their own way.
Yeah, no, that's really well put and summarized. I think it's another deeper element around self-discovery and social and emotional learning to layer into, I think, what we've already tried to tackle within 21st century skill building as that SEL to workplace component that we emphasize a ton around. But yeah, even more so just around like awareness of how I'm feeling today, and making sure that we're having fun with the prompts and questions that we do ask to inspire that for a student. So it's not all serious. It should be fun.
Yeah,
Um,
totally.
yeah, all that.
Nick, you're a musician by original trade, though you've kind of reinvented yourself in much the spirit of what you're trying to help kids do as well. What do you think that you've taken from your journey in music to the work you're doing now? I know you've named some of it already about making it fun and enjoyable and engaging, but really like your own path being a musician to now the founder and co-founder of an organization like Find Your Grind. What kind of translated for you in your own sense of self? Like what qualities have persisted?
Yeah. I think this idea of like the future isn't a straight line, and it's definitely hasn't been that for me. I've always been someone who's loved having hands in multiple fires and multiple projects that can help ultimately build more value and increase more opportunity across the different things that I'm involved in. And I think that's just been like a awareness piece for myself of like what really inspires me and allows me to tick at my full 100% as a human being. And I've loved being able to yeah, just be a part of other things. Like education isn't just the only thing that I focus on all day long. As an example, like I have a record label that I get to work with all kinds of awesome artists on the music side, and keeps my creative energy up so that I can come over to Find Your Grind and still have my business energy. And so I think for me, it's been able to have like both sides of the brain on at all times. I'm not just a creative person. I'm not just a business person. I can bring both to the table, which I feel like has been a cool part of my life so far. A quick example is 4 years ago when we did create this Find Your Grind tour, we actually had my music company build out the entire production and the entire tour for Find Your Grind. So that's a way where it's like, okay, we booked all
Yeah.
the talent. The music side was booking the talent. It created the festival. It brought the production in. It booked all of the schools that we went to. And Find Your Grind could come in as the brand and the ethos and the mission on top of that. So that's kind of that creative ecosystem thinking that really I love to do and be a part of as like a founder, and connecting pieces together like that. Um, Maybe that answers your question. I don't know.
No, it does because you like ultimately you're teaching kids about how qualities can drive the path you take. And you just named, you have multiple qualities. I know that you gave out wristbands at the lifestyle fair in
Yeah.
Montgomery. You would have multiple wristbands, and you're using your wristband qualities to do different parts of your life. And that brings you fulfillment, which is the
Mhm.
goal.
Totally. Totally. Yeah. Great point. See, you summarize it better than I do, you
I
know?
mean, listen, it's kind of my job here on the podcast, right? Like I'm supposed to
Yeah.
bring these things together.
Yeah. Yeah. For
But
sure.
I'm finding my own bracelets recently. I had an epiphany not even 2 weeks ago about, I mean, like I've always been verbal. I was the kid who got like always talking in class. I was in college. I was running organizations. And now like here I am, working at an ed tech organization and also leading a podcast. Like
Yeah.
my bracelets are plentiful as well. And so that's why I think I'm really enamored with what y'all are doing. I don't know if I seem
Yeah.
fangirly here, but like I am really enamored with it because I think had I realized some of this earlier, I don't know that I would change my path, but I would maybe have more kind of contentment about the journey that I've taken and where I was along the journey.
I love that. Yeah. We always emphasize like, it's not about the destination, it's about the journey. It sounds kind of cliche and whatever, but I think that it's a good piece to bring up just because if I were to tell a young person what to focus on today, what would be my advice? Sorry if you're going to ask me that, Haley, but it would be something
You know,
around
you're doing great. Yeah, that's the last
yeah.
question. Go for
It,
it. Go for it.
yeah, it would be like you don't need to have it all figured out as it right? Like stop
Yeah.
putting so much pressure to have the one thing figured out that you're going to go do because it's so natural to be able to just get started, right? You never know where things are going to push you and point you in terms of directions. And so I think for me, it's so much more important about like the journey and the direction over the destination and having that be the focal point in terms of being able to save a young person time and energy and confusion around where they want to go. It's like start in a direction that might seem interesting to you. Take your lifestyle assessment. Focus on the journey because it's most likely going to change every 2, 3, 5 years. And it's just about getting started and not being stuck, and that's been so much the case for me too, of just like, I've just put myself into so many things all the time. I've had countless things not work out and countless things that haven't, turned out in my favor or whatever. But like, I think just keeping the energy alive and just pushing forward and letting the universe open up to you a bit of like showing you the best ways to go, I think is kind of that, I don't know, universal meditative side of my brain too. That's just like trusting in the process and being along for the journey. So that's I'd say for any young kid, right? Like just keep going. Don't feel stuck.
I love that, Nick. I'm going to end it right there because there's no better point to end on than that. I am so grateful you spent your time with us today. Thank you for coming on the Learning Can't Wait podcast.
This was amazing. Thanks, Haley.
And thanks everybody for tuning in.